Hello everyone, welcome to This Week in Stupid for the 14th of August 2016. This week, feminist zealots in the British government have been put on full damage control mode after a Tory MP says that they want to have their cake and eat it too. In response to not understanding this metaphor, feminist zealots decided to tweet pictures of themselves looking extremely conceited or unhinged while eating cake. I don't know if I have the heart to spoil this for these clearly mentally deficient children, so I'm just going to leave them wondering where their cake has gone after they finish eating it. A Tory MP has spoken at a men's rights conference hosted by an anti-feminism party, telling the audience that feminist zealots really do want to have their cake and eat it. Philip Davis, the Conservative MP for Shipley, delivered a 45-minute speech at the International Conference on Men's Issues, hosted by the Justice for Men and Boys Party. Davies, who sits on the Commons Justice Committee, told the conference at the XL Centre in London that Britain's justice system was skewed in favour of women and discriminated against men. And now we get to the part where The Guardian decides to smear his character. Davies, a pro-Brexit campaigner who backed Andrea Leadsom for the Tory leadership, appeared alongside anti-feminist bloggers who have likened the activist Malala Yousafzai to Osama bin Laden and called single mothers bona fide idiots. But did Davis call these people these things? No, other anti-feminist bloggers did this, as if Davies is now supposed to be taking responsibility for things other people have said and done. Davies says they fight for their version of equality on all things that suit women, but are very quick to point out that women need special protections and treatments on other things. He once claimed that men struggle to be heard in Parliament, a view for which he was publicly criticised by the Labour MP Jess Phillips, and they leave a link to that. Should we see what the link is?
The opportunity for men to raise issues that are important to them is very limited. And just to give you a flavour, Mr Chairman, of the type of things that may come up and which will be part of International Men's Day, I'm not entirely sure why it's so humorous, but to discuss issues such as men's shorter life expectancy, wider male health issues, many of which go unreported through embarrassment of men to sort of go along and talk about these things.
Everything Davies has been speaking about has been entirely true. There is a sentencing gap. There is a problem with male suicide. There is a problem with compassion towards men, as Jess Phillips will aptly demonstrate. And just to let anyone know who wonders what my problem with Jess Phillips is, this: I have nothing but contempt for her because she is a gender bigot.
You have to excuse me for laughing, that the idea that men don't have the opportunity to ask questions in this place is a frankly laughable thing, as I say, as the only woman on this committee.
She is a fucking moron. She thinks that men and women's issues are the same thing as men and women talking. If the House was talking about nothing but women's issues 100% of the time, she would still consider that to be discussion on men's issues, because she is a fucking half-wit. And I particularly revile the way that she laughs at the male suicide epidemic or unfair sentencing or any of these other issues that are legitimate, actual, tangible things that can be measured.
The idea that this chamber, that these houses, both of them, in any way reflect gender equality is to me a frankly laughable thing.
Well, of course they don't, Pudding Cup. When someone tries to talk about men's issues, you laugh at them. These are valid things that need to be discussed, and an ideologue like Phillips will not allow it to happen. Davies says, "It seems to me that this has led in equality, but only when it suits a gender that applies to women. The drive for women to have so-called equality on the things that suit the politically correct agenda, but not on other things that don't, is of increasing concern to me. For example, we hear plenty about increasing the numbers of women on company boards and female representation in Parliament. However, there's a deafening silence when it comes to increasing the number of men who have custody of their children, or who have careers as midwives. In fact, generally there seems to be a deafening silence on all the benefits women have compared to men." Davies is clearly a voice in the wilderness at the moment, and he's obviously going to feel the backlash of the zealot's tongue in all sorts of progressive media. He puts his email address on his Twitter account, and I'm sure that if anyone wanted to email him to show him some support, he'd probably greatly appreciate it. He genuinely seems to be fighting the good fight against the forces of bigotry, so I'd like to show him a bit of a salute and say well done for standing up. If anyone else is interested in contacting him, I'll leave a link to his Twitter profile in the description. And I say that the feminist zealots are going to come out in force against him because they already are. Philip Davies claims that courts favour women not backed by evidence, says someone who doesn't want to look at the evidence. Lady Jean Corston, a Labour peer, considered to be an authority on women in the justice system, has said there's no evidence to support Tory MP Philip Davies' claim that women are treated leniently by courts and prison services. Have you tried looking at the data? So far, all of these articles have been on The Guardian, and you know what? We don't even need to leave The Guardian to find the data about this, because The Guardian has already reported on it. The other gender divide, where men are losing out. They say there are far more men than women in prison. One explanation for this is simply that they are more inherently prone to violence, crime or drug use, but this attitude might conceal important facts or even alternative explanations. 29% of male first-time offenders were sentenced to custody. For women, that figure was 17%. Men have a 62% chance of being bailed, while for women that figure is 80%. And on average, men serve 53% of their sentence, but women serve 5% less than that. The average length of the sentence, whatever the plea, also suggests that there may be some issues in the criminal justice system. Once in prison, men are likely to continue to suffer discrimination. A much publicised scheme addressing the need to take away prisoner privileges only applies to men. And let's not forget that judges were flat out ordered to show more mercy to women criminals when deciding sentences, according to the Equal Treatment Bench Book, which was given to them by the Judicial Studies Board, which is responsible for training the judiciary. But you know what, let's just ignore this and listen to the feminist zealot who says that none of this evidence exists. So what do other feminist zealots say? Well, again at The Guardian, MPs such as Philip Davies make me proud to be a feminist zealot, says a total bigot who for some reason needs to broadcast this from the rooftops, and for some reason The Guardian publishes this, and then they wonder why they're making fuck all money. The Conservative MP Philip Davies has accused me of wanting to have my cake and eat it. I say he accused me, the specific accusation was to feminist zealots, but I'm all holding up my hand. I am a zealot when it comes to feminism, and a militant too, which is handy because that's the only way people like Davies describe feminists. Because apparently it's fucking accurate. When he said feminist zealots are going too far, you put your hand up and say, hey, I resemble that remark. But you're going to go, oh no, it's the only way he can describe feminists. Yeah, hashtag not all feminists are total zealots, just most of them. I really care about being a feminist. I really care about women in this country being able to both take up new opportunities that arise as women's equality advances and continue the battle against the range of injustices that still impede us in every walk of life. Total empty rhetoric. Just total bullshit. What are you even arguing against at this point? Give me one fucking specific. You sound as vacuous as any politician. The wonderful thing about Davies' awful comments is that they shed light on what is happening right across British politics. From the tiny dark cave at the back of the Conservative Party where Davies lives, in the shadow of a female leader who, when she took over from a man, reduced the number of women in the cabinet, to the lads of the Labour Party currently winning every candidacy opportunity from mayors to leadership contenders, to the all-male, all-white Liberal Democrats whose fight back doesn't yet include fighting for women's rights. None of these parties seem to think equality for women is in any way a priority. I love how she manages to belittle Davies while admitting that feminism is failing on all fronts. But the thing is, Davies speaking for the Justice for Men and Boys Party, that's horrible and disgusting. That's vile. What we need is a women's party that she's now going to promote. The Women's Equality Party has policies to bring down the barriers to women seeking justice in the UK. They include unconscious bias training for all police, magistrates, judges and jurors to address ingrained attitudes towards women who are the victims of sexually violent crimes. That sounds an awful lot like you're planning to brainwash the entire law enforcement and judicial systems. The thing is, our feminist zealots are not done yet. They now want to deny women the rights to a fair trial. Julie Bindel. Juries have no place at rape trials. Victims deserve unprejudiced justice. The right to a fair trial is usually defined as something like a trial before a jury of your peers under an impartial judge. Julie wants to take that away. She doesn't want an impartial judge, she wants a feminist judge, and she wants to remove the jury of the peers. She wants a privileged system for women when it comes to rape trials. Bindle's writing basically sounds like Glenn Beck if he was a fat lesbian. Almost a decade ago, I wrote that rape might as well be legal. I feel the same way today, of course you do. In 2013-14 in England and Wales, about 16,000 rapes were recorded by police. Okay, stop you there. No. They didn't record 16,000 rapes. They recorded 16,000 allegations of rape. And apparently only a third of these cases were sent to the Crown Prosecution Service. So only a third of them had a chance of actually having maybe the evidence, or maybe the story was at least straight, to go to prosecution. And approximately 15% of the recorded offences resulted in a charge. Julie, you have just assumed your own conclusion there. You have assumed every single time a woman goes to the police and says, "He raped me," that it is 100% honest. And now you're saying, well look, because so many of them aren't charged, that must mean that they happened and the police force simply isn't interested in addressing them. This means rape might as well be legal. One potential solution at this worrying state of affairs is to do away with jurors in sex crime trials and appoint a specially trained judge. What, like a feminist judge? I am wholly in favour of our jury system, except for when you're advocating abolishing it, but even more in favour of ensuring that rapists and other sex offenders do not walk free. Yes, Julie, but how many innocent people will you be convicting? Oh, you don't know? Oh, well, that's because you've set up a system that presumes the guilt of the accused, which is what they tried to do a few years ago in New Zealand, which is what you then cite, saying they could be the first country to rid sex crime cases of jurors. Then they are also going in a regressive direction. So that is feminism this week. They are open zealots in a cause that they believe to be 100% good because they simply deny the bad. They simply deny that men have any problems or that feminism could do any wrong, and it's not like they're trying to undermine the legal system or anything like that. No. Everyone is just a fucking misogynist. It's not that they are nuts. In fact, since we're on the subject, let's continue talking about how British society continues to allow its own institutions to be undermined by simply not applying its laws evenly. Revealed. Police too scared to stop vote rigging in Muslim areas, damning report finds. Why? Why would they be afraid of preventing vote rigging? Ensuring the integrity of our democracy itself. What is there to be afraid about on this subject? A study headed by Sir Eric Pickles found that authorities are not doing enough to stamp out bullying and religious intimidation among Asian authorities during the lead up to elections. The report has even called for a dramatic overhaul of the electoral system, warning the integrity of democracy is at stake. So, nothing important, nothing worth actually ensuring the integrity of or anything like that. The Electoral Commission also came under fire for making the situation worse by encouraging the use of foreign language, with Sir Eric saying it leaves the door open to fraud. He was chosen by David Cameron to head up the Electoral Fraud Commission following the vote scandal in Tower Hamlets, East London. Former Mayor of Tower Hamlets, Lufar Rahman, was relieved of his position after he was found guilty of corrupt and illegal practices. Okay, so what is their issue? Why are they doing this? Last year's general election was littered with accusations of radical Islamists pressuring voters at polling stations, reportedly claiming that voting was, quote, un-Islamic. Well, I suppose it is. I suppose voting is un-Islamic, and I suppose if you're a hardcore militant Islamist and you can't stand the idea of people doing anything that's un-Islamic, you would want to stop people from voting. Stickers were also placed at some polling stations urging Muslims not to vote, and there have also been accusations of postal voting fraud in predominantly Asian areas, just years after a judge found evidence of fraud in Birmingham. And you already know why the police are refusing to do something on this. I mean, obviously voter fraud is illegal, and if they have clear evidence of voter fraud, and not just one piece of evidence in one place, apparently quite a lot of evidence for multiple different cities, you would think the police would be like, okay, there's clearly a systemic problem here, we need to step in and enforce the laws. But you already know why they don't. The report found police were unwilling to step in because of supposed fears of claims of discrimination. and they were too concerned about being proactive on some issues because of potential allegations of discrimination. That's right. They fail to uphold the integrity of democracy in Britain because they are afraid of being called racists. Personally, I consider this one of the most serious things that's happening in Britain today. Not just the undermining of democracy in this country by communities of now millions of people, but the fact that the authorities are too scared to act on this, too scared to actually do something about it. This is the climate of fear people are talking about when they say that political correctness has gone too far. In this country, it's fucking crazy what the police are afraid of, and so will let happen. And I'm sure when I say that, many of you are thinking, well, yes, I remember the Rotherham scandal. And I have some bad news for you. It's still going on. So an investigation by The Express reveals how organised criminal gangs of paedophiles are still using the town as their own personal fiefdom, peddling underage girls for sex as part of a multi-million-pound crime empire. This investigation lifts the lid on the shocking case of abuse that is still going on in Rotherham, 2 years after a landmark report into the scandal ruled police and council workers had ignored the issue for fear of being branded racist. Professor Alexis Jay's astonishing probe revealed at least 1,400 girls were groomed by sex gangs between 1997 and 2013, and unearthed a series of scandalous failings by local authorities. A recent follow-up report, published by Professor John Drew in March, concluded that police are now adequately tackling child grooming and historic failures that have been isolated. But testimony pieced together from independent sources paints a starkly different picture of the authorities' response. Basically what they're saying is that this has been a whitewash, which I can't say I'm surprised about. A number of people who gave evidence to Professor Drew's inquiry expressed open dismay at his findings and told us the grooming of girls is now as bad as it has ever been. Many have told Express that their outright anger at the police and local council workers have not done more to crack down on the grooming gangs. One victim, who we have called Ellie to protect her identity, said, "The raping of white girls by these men is still going on. Some I know have had to wait months before they're even asked to give a statement to the police. It's shockingly bad still." In light of the scandalous failings of South Yorkshire Police to tackle child sexual exploitation, the government sent the National Crime Agency to oversee the inquiry. The investigation, called Operation Stovewood, is currently probing more than 7,000 lines of inquiry. But Ellie said, "What have the National Crime Agency been doing for the last 18 months with their £10 million? No arrests yet. We're feeling desperate and disheartened." Another girl, going under the pseudonym Lizzie, said, "I know a few girls who have come forward recently and been told they're being racist, and I know a lot won't come forward, and to be fair, I can't blame them. Nothing has changed, not in the slightest. It's still the same scale as before." She added, "It doesn't shock me anymore because I'm used to hearing it. You hear it on a daily basis, about new girls on a daily basis. All you can do really is help them, and I wouldn't advise people to go to the police because they don't do anything. I'd rather take it into my own hands." A third victim said, "It's just as bad as it was before because they just don't care. They don't want to tackle it." One of the ways the grooming gangs were able to get away with their crimes for so long was due to a coordinated campaign of witness intimidation, which made the girls and their families too scared to speak out. Recalling a series of incidents which took place in March this year, he said, "Every night for 13 nights out of 14 between midnight and 1 AM, we had people coming and knocking on the door saying it was takeaways. We don't really eat takeaways, and when we looked through the spy hole, they had no food, and you could see a car full of Asians." Rotherham MP Sarah Champion said abuse is still going on in the town and that she still gets new girls coming to her on a regular basis, although the numbers have dropped off. Maybe because they're not getting any help. She said, "There are new cases, there are ongoing cases, there are live cases. What I'm seeing is a lot of people coming forward with peer-on-peer abuse, and it's not so much the older Pakistani men that I'm hearing as the perpetrator. We shouldn't accept that it's an inevitability. We've got young people growing up not knowing what consent is, so I'm not surprised the age range is starting to drop." You can see the startling disconnect between the people with power and the people on the ground. They literally, they just don't understand what consent is. No, these are gangs of men who are bullying people, and they're raping young girls, and they're doing it because they have an in-group and you are the out-group. And it's okay to do all of this to the outgroup. It's fine, it's not. And if people object, they are subject to a campaign of intimidation about what's going on. And yet, well, you know, these people just don't know what consent is. No, they know exactly what they're doing. They're taking advantage of you. They're taking advantage of the fact that you're going to turn a blind eye. You should be making examples of every single one of these men. Rotherham Council leader Chris Reed added, "Tragically, there will always be criminals who want to hurt vulnerable young people, and we know children are still being exploited in communities up and down the country, including Rotherham. Yes, it's happening everywhere, so don't worry about it." You know, I mean, Chris, we're talking specifically about Rotherham. Why are you like, yeah, this happens everywhere? No, it doesn't have to happen everywhere, Chris. And it wouldn't be happening everywhere if the police and the councillors would simply do their fucking jobs and arrest these people. Crack down on these people. Young girls are getting their lives ruined because you were afraid of being called racist. Well, we can allay those fears immediately, right away, right now, today. You're a racist, Chris. You're a disgusting, putrid, vile racist. You are a bigot of the highest order, as are all of Rotherham City Council and all of the police. You're all racists. Disgusting, dyed-in-the-wool, BNP voting racists. Now go out and do your fucking jobs and arrest the men who are raping young girls. Oh, we don't want to call racist. Too late. You've been called a racist. Now go and do your fucking job. Seriously though, what is it about young Muslim men and grooming gangs? Why do they produce so many of them? Children terrified to use toilets at Greek refugee camps for fear of being raped. Youngsters in Greece's refugee camps as young as 7 are alleged to have been targeted by sexual predators, with charities, human rights groups complaining the camps are unsafe. In one government-run camp outside Thessalonica, women are terrified to go into the camp toilets in the dark for fear of sexual attacks. The camp contains around 1,400 mainly Syrian refugees. A volunteer at the camp, a former Softex toilet roll factory, claims that young girls were being groomed by male gangs. Why? Why gangs? Why grooming gangs? Why, I mean, do Muslim men really have such a disrespect for women who are not also Muslim that they simply don't care that this happens? Where are the older men reining these young men in? And the allegations were disputed by the Greek coordinator for the refugee crisis. Softex is the camp with the most cases of small criminal behaviour, but there was not any case of rape reported to the camp staff. Well, I mean, call me cynical, but I have a funny feeling you're probably covering something up, aren't you? And I only say that because no matter where you go in Europe, the authorities seem hell-bent on covering up Muslim crimes. And the thing is, I'm really not even joking when I say this. I mean, in Rotherham for decades, the police covered up these crimes. In Cologne on New Year's Eve, the police literally wrote, "Quiet evening, nothing happened." And now you're saying, look, no reports of sex crimes at all in our camp, despite what charities working in the camp say. Doctors Without Borders in Thessalonica confirmed that they had heard reports of children being subjected to sexual violence. In the evening and night, it's impossible to find the children because they are hiding in the tents. Women are afraid. They complain that during the night and evening they cannot get to the toilet alone. They have all heard reports of others being attacked. She added that her organisation was in regular contact with at least 10 women from Softex camp as well as children. Many others were too frightened to report other instances. More of that witness intimidation that we heard so much about in Britain. And these reports are corroborated by the Red Cross. They say, "We've been receiving reports of sexual violence and making reports of the incidents. We are concerned that there are serious protection issues." In other Greek refugee camps such as Lesbos, Chios and Kos and Athens also report similar incidents. Staff at Save the Children in Lesbos were told by youngsters that they were too afraid to go to sleep outside or use the toilets because they feared abuse. And I really do wonder about just the people organising and controlling all of this. When a Chinese tourist gets lost and ends up in a refugee centre. Well, did you think he was from Afghanistan or something? He had his wallet stolen and ended up setting machinery in motion that he couldn't get out of. He spent 12 days trapped in our bureaucratic jungle because he couldn't communicate. Germany is unfortunately an extremely bureaucratic country, especially during the refugee crisis. I've seen how much red tape we have. He'd been robbed, he bumbled his way into an asylum centre, not speaking any German obviously, where he had his passport taken from him and was put into this camp to be processed. He apparently filed his papers in the presence of a Mandarin interpreter, Therefore, he should have been aware of the steps he was taking, and ended up travelling 220 miles to a refugee shelter elsewhere, where he was given food and spending money like other refugees. I hope the Germans watching this are very pleased with how their money is being spent. People from other countries can just come on over. Whether they're Syrian or not, it doesn't matter. In fact, they could be fucking Chinese for all the German government cares, and they're going to sit there, put them in a shelter, and give them your money. And on the subject of this costing a lot of money, the Swedish authorities want your home for newcomers. Now, they're not talking about the home you're currently living in. If you are an upper middle class person who has a secondary country home somewhere off in a different district of Sweden, the government wants to pay you money to house refugees there. Ali Rashidi, traditional Swedish name, head of social services at Norged, fuck you Sweden, said that the municipality in some cases may step in and ensure rents will be paid in full. According to their complaints, asylum seekers expected to have their own permanent apartments, as opposed to the modular housing that was hastily built to take care of new arrivals, and where the tenants are forced to share a kitchen with their fellow migrant families. You know, like animals. Sweden's swelling housing problems were dramatically exacerbated by last year's migrant crisis, as the Nordic country of under 10 million people took in over 160,000 asylum seekers. The government estimates that the housing shortage necessitates the construction of 250,000 new homes, whereas the public housing organisation SABO indicates the need for a jaw-dropping 426,000 new homes, and the National Housing Board found that 240 of Sweden's 290 municipalities suffered from a shortage of housing. Who the fuck is paying for that? Who is paying for all of these people to come over and be given permanent accommodation in your countries? How can they be entitled to this? How could anyone suggest this is the right thing to do for the West? For any of these countries? I mean, surely it would just make more sense if we sent them bucket loads of fucking cash. I mean, we would still be out billions of euros and billions of pounds, but at least we wouldn't have all the social problems of housing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of extra people, let alone the obvious cultural differences we're experiencing between these two groups of people. I mean, our politicians are insane. They are not enforcing our laws universally and uniformly across our nations. This is fucking terrible. This can't go on. And all of this happened this week.